Welcome to the Gentle Art Podcast with Gene Dunn. Today we have assembled the troops. Gentlemen, well, first let me introduce you, PJ, Brandon, and Ollie. I thought that the podcast that each of you did was so stellar and so unique, and in some sort of odd way, they all fit together. And I thought, it would be great to have all three of you on and kind of discuss your thoughts about each other's podcasts and kind of what came up. And I got to say that, the response from all of your podcasts have been just incredible. I get DMs all the time about how great they were, how powerful they were, how articulate, intelligent, the list goes on. So first of all, I want to say thank you for coming. And I love you all so much. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy you're here. And I'm so inspired to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
The podcast studio is extra hot today. I wonder why Walter and Josh are cheaping it out on that. I'm just kidding. So, PJ, let's start with you. I presented the question in the beginning before we went on air that what's one thing that you got from the podcast that you listened to from Professor Brandon or Professor Ollie, and let's take it from there.
Sure. So, both of those podcasts were phenomenal, and I know both of these gentlemen for quite some time now, and even just listening to it, there were so many new thoughts that you both expressed through that conversation that was really good for me. But to start, it seemed like the overall theme with the conversation with Professor Ali was around discipline and structure and protocol. And I don't know, most probably know, but there might be some new people that listen that don't know much about Ali. But those things are exactly who he's been since the day I met him. Like the day that I met you, Ali, I don't know if you remember, we were in the gym. It was me, Brandon, me and Brandon at Planet Fitness.
We were 18.
And yeah, we were very, very young. We were about 18 years old, and Ali was just beginning his career in the military. And from that point on, the more I got to know Ali, the more I realized that those things, discipline, structure, protocol, that is pretty much who he is. And sometimes we laugh about it because he believes in it so much that it's how does one man believe in something so powerful and share it with everybody in such an effortless way? It's almost unbelievable. But the thing that stuck out to me specifically was I was able to witness during that period of COVID when the school really needed some help.
Yeah.
Ali had a ton of responsibility between the bar, law school,
exam.
the bar exam. Yeah,
He was going.
Yeah. The bar exam, law school, the military career, family. I believe it was around the time that he just made a move out of Brooklyn, right?
Yep.
Still keeping up with training and stepped up to the plate to really save that school.
Saved it.
Yeah, and in many ways, the same thing I guess happened at Avenue U as well. That was a time where, if ever, those principles were most important, and that podcast, that conversation highlighted that very, very well, I felt. And it made me think to myself, I need to follow those a little bit, a little stricter. I need to be on top of myself when it comes to discipline and protocol, because you as proof, right? And all of us as proof, really, but you as proof specifically, right? Since you're the subject of this right now. You've had so much success and so many great things that it's so inspiring being on the side and watching it. Why not adopt it to my own lifestyle as well? And it's there, but it's a nice reminder, like that's the way that works. You know,
It can be improved upon.
absolutely, yeah. And it's always changing, right? Like every day is different, right?
That's right.
Every day we're faced with a different circumstance, right? Things always come up, but it's a nice reminder, like when we have that moment of panic, protocol, structure, discipline, those are the things we should fall back on.
Beautiful.
So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Brandon, you have a thought?
Sure. I'll talk about
Are we all
Professor
talking about me now?
Ollie's. Yeah, we'll talk about
Yeah. Bask in it.
So yesterday, I was at home and it was the first day of the Paris Olympics.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show my girlfriend judo because she never had seen it before.
Uh-huh.
So I turned it on, and the first people that were up, one guy was from Paris, and the other guy was from Kazakhstan.
Was it Teddy Rainier? Was it
No,
big?
they were small guys.
Oh, they were
Small guys. And they're, I'm sure they're the best, but it was like they were going at it, and I was looking at my girlfriend watching it to see her reaction. I was looking back, and I was thinking, like, this isn't what I want her first exposure to this to be, because it was like very rough. It was brutal. A lot of like chest pounding and celebrating.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, hold on. Like, and I fast forward a little bit, and I found a Japanese woman,
Abe.
a different Japanese woman,
Okay.
another small Japanese woman. And the reason I mention it is because she won the match with an ippon.
Yeah.
And I looked at my girlfriend. I was like, this is where it gets good. Like,
Yeah.
look at how she acts after that.
Right.
Courteous, checked on the other person, bowed off the mat, completely silent, no chest pounding, no jumping into the stands or anything like that. And I was like, that's the martial arts. And when I listened to Professor Ollie's podcast, it connected with that point for me. It's like he's about protocol, he's about structure, he's about standard, and that is the beauty of the martial arts, one of the beauties of the martial arts. And he exemplifies that. And he's the kind of person you've talked about in the past, like, I would love for my teacher to meet this student that I have because they represent the martial arts well. Professor Ollie is that person.
That's
Like,
beautiful.
If I wanted to introduce someone to the martial arts, I'd want them to see someone like Professor Ollie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Don't blush.
You want to respond, or you want to talk about one of their podcasts? And
Yeah, absolutely.
go ahead.
I remember in my podcast, one of the things I specifically mentioned was that this fear of accountability is only possible when you surround yourself with others that are able to do the same. And I think, as much as you all believe, and I'm honored that you all believe that I am a testament to that. I think you all play a big part in that, and I think you all embody that just as much as I do. I truly believe that. And I think when we're able to hold each other accountable, and when we're able to enforce the same standards and the same discipline, albeit in a variety of spectrums, but when we're able to do that together, I think that's really where the true growth happens. Individually, yes, but then collectively. And I think the four of us sitting here today, I think is just a perfect example of that.
I'm really present to how beautiful the space is, like, and to just to kind of echo your point, Brandon, about no chest pounding. And I had said to all three of you, I want to normalize men complimenting other men, and and show people what it's like to be in an environment with other men where they're not constantly trying to put each other down under the guise of humor, under the guise of sarcasm, and that, like, you can all actually coexist effectively, efficiently, with principle, and not have to smash one another, not have to, like, just prove something all the time. Lovely. Great. Professor, you want You want to start with one of their podcasts?
Absolutely. I'll
please?
start with Professor Brandon.
Uh-huh.
So many of us may not know this, but Professor Brandon and I, we didn't meet on the mat. We met at we met
Now
at
people are gonna know.
This is where it all really began. We met at Wendy's, and you know, we were coworkers. I believe around that time Brandon was maybe 15 and I was about 17. And you know, from the very instant I met him, he was a very optimistic, outgoing, just really charismatic individual. I think charismatic would be the best way to describe Professor Brandon. And you know, no matter what the situation may be, he would always bring others up around you, whether that be in a comedic manner or whether that be just in a supportive way. And you know, when I listen to your podcast, I never, you know, I've always had this thought in my mind that, wow, I really wish I started the martial arts when I was 4, like Professor Brandon. Like, you bathe your whole life in jiu-jitsu, in karate, in kickboxing. And, you know, I always thought to myself, this is natural to him. You know, he's done this since he started walking, since he started crawling. And this is why he is so freaking good. But one thing that never really came to my mind was, you know, you've had challenges of your own. You know, you've had adversity that you faced on your own. And so I think just sort of hearing about your transition from a teenager into a young adult and sort of just stepping away from the martial arts and coming back into it, it was really, really inspiring to see. Because I think now, out of anyone in the organization, I think, and Shihan and I were talking about this past Friday, but it's really great to see just how innovative you are, just how inspiring you are, how creative you are as it relates to the growth of the schools, the growth of your students, the growth of the students, and certainly the staff at the Bay Parkway Dojo. And I think a big part of that really just comes from your transition in the martial arts and really your growth from a tiny tiger white belt to the injury that you had and sort of the time that forced you to step away from karate and then your time back into the martial arts. I think all of that is really shown now. I think it's shown through your actions. I think it's shown through your inactions. Really just in your ability to be present. And I think your story is such an inspiration to all, and myself included.
Wow.
Beautiful, Professor. Thank you.
And then PJ.
Oh, wait one second. Let
Yes.
PJ speak about, like,
Yeah,
let's go to
since we're on that,
Brandon.
I always tell Brandon, and I told him this like right after the podcast, like after every conversation we have, I probably say it, but after the podcast, remember I texted you, I was like, man, I just wish there was like another hour of you speaking because you
There is.
and there is, right? No, and then there's gonna be another one after that.
It's coming out. It's coming out.
Stay tuned for
You
part
wish
2.
it was been granted.
And then after that one, I'll probably text him the same thing.
Yeah. By the way, you're not the only person to see that. Like when your episode aired, like I got 4 messages going like, I want more. What? And I was like, it's coming.
Oh.
Walter's on it.
Oh yeah. Thanks, Walter. No, so there were so many great points there, but just to touch upon a couple, you know, we went to the same high school together, so we had some of the same experiences with adults that were pretty much entrusted the responsibility to teach us and prepare us for what would come next, I guess, academically, which would be either the next grade, college, life, what have you, right? And I caught the sense that you felt what a lot of us probably felt with our school experience, definitely what I felt, but those adults kind of failed us a little bit. You know, they weren't the best leaders, and it wasn't because they weren't, you know, they didn't have the credentials to teach whatever lesson that they were teaching. It was that it didn't go beyond that. And when you came back to the dojo and you interacted with Shihan, something happened there that completely changed your perspective on like what adults can be, but more importantly, what you could become. And you felt so strongly about the direction that you wanted your life to go, navigating through jujitsu and the martial art training, that you introduced it to me and you brought it into my life, which has been the biggest, like the biggest gift that we could probably give one another. To that point, actually, just a side note, last year for Brandon's birthday, we had this idea, instead of giving each other like a tangible gift, right? Why not gift each other with an experience?
Yeah.
And we went out for a wonderful dinner and then hit a little night spot afterwards for
The
his birthday
experience of
last
food
year.
for Brandon is
Yeah,
always a hit.
amazing.
I know,
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah, for all three of us, we all love food, you know. We
Food
love
is-
food,
yeah.
you know. But to think that gift like the gift that you gave me of welcoming me into this realm was the most like powerful moment in my life, because the way we all interact with one another stems from how we interact with each other, like physically at the dojo, and it overlaps that how we deal with each other outside when we're socializing, when we're having deep conversations. So thank you for that. But one last tiny point, because there were so many great things about that podcast. You speak about your father, right? And his experience in the martial arts, and we've had a couple of conversations about, you know, what it could have been, right, if you were both able to interact in the martial art world together. And I think we both had conversations, and you probably started to realize, like, you are one stellar man, and I'm sure with like your father was in that room when you got that black belt. I think we were all brought to tears that day. It was
Wow.
a really powerful moment, because we had the unique experience of witnessing where you started and where you're at now, and boy, has it been an amazing ride. And I can't wait for part 2 of that podcast. We might have to do this again after part 2.
One last thing. Really, that moment where you got your black belt, like, it's gonna exist in my mind for my whole life. And I hope, if and when the day comes for me to get my black belt, it's even a fraction of the way it was for you. Wow. Just wow.
It's the power of that event, you know, the milestone. It's really great. I do want to kind of close out this portion by saying, you know, I'd said like the response from the listeners has been great from each one of your podcasts. I also want to note that, like, when each of you found out that the other one was doing a podcast, you were all like, when's it coming out? When am I going to hear it? When am I going to hear it? You know, and like you did the same, like you just did that for each other, and you were genuinely happy for one another and genuinely interested in what each other had to say on the platform. And it was really lovely to experience. Like it didn't actually register for me until now, but like each one of you were like, when's that podcast coming out? Like, I can't wait to hear it. Like, and I'm so excited, and it was just, the feedback was great.
Thank you.
Brandon, you want to?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
After you.
Well, he started. You started on PJ. You're next,
Okay.
PJ, please.
If I could just say
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you quickly.
Sorry about that.
No, I mean, everyone in my life that isn't in like my close group of friends always has something to say about how amazing my friend group is. They're like family, and it's cliche, but they just treat each other and they treat me so well, and these are just two of the best people in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for them.
Beautiful.
And thank you for giving us this space to talk about it. It's so special. Thank you.
You know, it's funny. Like we literally talk We talk often, weekly basis, if not on a daily basis. But it's nice to be under this roof right now, sharing this experience.
Yeah. There's a different context for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice, because we had a conversation that was very directed. And I, like, you may have had similar conversations with each other, but you certainly didn't have that conversation. And I just thought it would be fascinating. Like, sorry to repeat myself, but to get some insight on what each of you thought about what you heard. I think that's fascinating. I don't think that that's happened.
Yeah, for the record, Shion, I don't think there are many men like yourself that really encourage this. Right? I think most people, if they were able to get 3 guys together that had some sort of like physical, what's the word? Like a physical, what word am I looking for over here?
Like the nature of the
Like,
relationship?
No. Like an activity, just a physical activity that
like
brings them
sport.
together, like a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They'd rather sit here and hear us just crack jokes on one another and
that's what I was
make it a
saying
common.
before.
Yeah.
Like, you guys, that's natural for you guys. And like, for someone who doesn't have that, or who's never experienced that, or goes like, I wish my friends would just shut the fuck up, like, and just stop cracking jokes, or stop with the sarcasm and just be cool for a second. Forgive my language, but that's how I experience it. I have friends that, like, certainly we crack jokes, certainly there's sarcasm, but it's not the extent of how we relate to each other. And that's, I think, really interesting. And as it relates to martial arts, because it can be very competitive, it can be very intense, it can be so many things. And to see it, to watch it, to hear it, and how you're navigating it naturally, I think it's fascinating. I just think it's fascinating. I think I'm right, by the way. Like, there's some really beautiful points happening. Take it away.
Yeah. The best for last. PJ.
Easy.
So, I think PJ's podcast was the first podcast to be released out of the 3 of us. And when it first came out, we were talking that day, and the first thing we said was, how awesome would it be if we were able to do a podcast together with Shihan?
Oh.
And this is before we even spoke about it. So,
well, mine, buddy. Yeah, you Aquaman me that day.
So the fact that we're here, thank you for having us. As PJ mentioned earlier, him and I met in perhaps the most oddest places possible at a Planet Fitness. And
was it the one on Avenue X?
It was on 86.
No,
even worse.
Even worse.
Free pizza on Friday.
And one of the things PJ was discussing in his podcast that I think it couldn't have come out at a better time, because around the time his podcast came out was around the time I asked PJ to give a speech at my wedding.
Oh.
And in the podcast, one thing he spoke about was just sort of mimicking what we're seeing online as it relates to not wanting to be submitted and sort of letting that ego come in the way in our training, and sort of just learning from that and working on this idea of being present. And I think it's something that I'm actively working on in my own practice. But man, as it relates to just your training, but then also just your friendship, your camaraderie, your loyalty, I think if I were to really describe what PJ does best, and it's a very long list, but one of the things that would be on that list is just being present. And when you spoke about that in your training, and sort of just putting that ego aside, or just not trying to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Gordon Ryan, and just being patient with your progress, and sort of being present with your progress, and being present with your training and in your growth, like, I think a lot of us could benefit from that mindset, from that perspective.
Thank you for listening to the Gentle Art Podcast. Please share, rate, and review. And if you have any questions or you'd like to reach out, please contact us at the GentleArtPodcast@gmail.com, or contact us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or thegentleartpodcast.com.